Merry Christmas and welcome to the first episode of the 12 Days of Christmas. And what better way to start the 12 Days of Christmas off than to talk about the history of Christmas. So I'll do a little thing about what I know. Christmas is a time for where families and friends get together, they celebrate, they feast, they open gifts for each other, and depending on your religious beliefs, you may also go to church, you may be part of a choir. I remember when I was younger I used to be in a choir and we used to sing a lot of hymns, so I'd sing like Silent Night and Away in a Manger and various things like that. I also remember learning of a Christmas story, no, not the traditional Christmas story of, as we know, Jesus was born in a stable. Nobody would let them in any sort of inn, but they were allowed to have a home in a stable where Mary gave birth to her child, Jesus Christ. I remember being told when I was younger as well, there was supposed to be a story after that. Now, there's probably no truth to this whatsoever, and I don't know if anybody else has heard this story, but I remember being told, because I remember asking a teacher and was like, why do we use tinsel for Christmas trees? And she said, well, after Jesus was born, the guards found out about his birth, so they went and hunted him and his family, and so they fled. And as they fled, they went into a cave that God directed them to, and although they were in the cave and a bit untrusting of what was going to happen, like, well, obviously they're going to find us if we're in this cave, God then made a tree grow in front of it, and made sure to grow a massive spider web that had dew on it as well. So it meant that when the guards came up to the cave and saw that the web hadn't been broken, they didn't think they'd obviously gone into the cave because there was a tree, the web hadn't been broken, so they mustn't have gone that way. And that is why we have tinsel on trees to represent the web that supposedly protected Jesus. I don't think it's an actual Bible story. It's definitely a story I got told as a kid. But I think it's quite a nice story, really, as to why we put tinsel on Christmas trees, or at least I think it's quite a nice story. But to find out the actual, or a better understanding as to the idea of Christmas and where it originated from, we need to step back, way back. So people have been celebrating at the end of the year, in the winter months, for centuries, even before the idea of Jesus or even the person himself was even on this planet. People had been celebrating at the end of the year, and this was the most ideal time because this was when animals had been slaughtered and all the beers and the ales that you've been brewing throughout the year were ready to be drunk. So it was an ideal time to celebrate. In Scandinavia, they would celebrate from the 21st and up until January, celebrating Yule with feasting, and the celebration would be the son of the family would find a log and they would burn that log, and that log would last for 12 days. From the 25th onwards, so it would last up to about 12 days, and they would celebrate and feast and they'd celebrate around this fire, hence why we have a Yule log as well. When Christianity came onto the scene, people didn't celebrate the birth of Christ. If anything, they used to celebrate Easter. That was more important to them. Yes, Christ was mentioned, Christ was believed in, Christ was celebrated, but his birth was never anything that they celebrated, and it was more about the representation of his death rather than his birth. And it wasn't until Pope Julius I in 335, he then decided we should probably celebrate Jesus' birthday on the 25th of December. And a lot of people believe that the reason why the church decided to do this was to be able to incorporate the winter solstice and the winter celebration that was already going on in the pagan tradition, and kind of just combined both the religions together. Makes sense, really. By the Middle Ages, people were no longer celebrating a lot of the pagan traditions. Instead, they would primarily be focusing on the Christian belief, and they would celebrate Christmas, and most often than not the day would be a day of complete rest, where people would just celebrate, and a lot of the poor would go to the more wealthy, where the wealthy would then give them foods and pay debts or imaginary debts to the people. There is other beliefs as well, that in the Roman belief they would also on this day celebrate by having a role reverse where children would be highly revered and slaves would become masters for the day. As time went on, Christmas itself has either grown or it's been changed. Even at the time of Oliver Cromwell, he completely decided to get rid of Christmas, completely getting rid of it, thinking it was not a good thing, just went, no, it's not going to exist. So Christmas itself has been a celebration for many, many centuries, with people pretty much similarly doing the same things we do today, which is celebrating with a feast with friends and family, and maybe giving the odd little gift to our loved ones as well. Now, the idea of Santa, and the more commercialised version of it, didn't come until a lot later on. Santa is based off a saint who was around in 280 AD, the Saint Nicholas. And Saint Nicholas is said to have given up all his wealth and went to be travelling and went into the countryside to help the poor, the sick and the needy. And he is the symbolism of Santa, so his name became Santa Claus, and that changed from Saint Nicholas all the way down to Santa Claus, with the wording changing, like Saint Chris, and finally changing to Saint Chris, and then Saint Santa Claus. But he didn't become a popular figure until the 18th century. Now, in the 1800s, so the time when Charles Dickens was around, Christmas, just this whole idea of Christmas, of what we celebrate today, is actually reasonably a modern thing. It's not something people have been celebrating for centuries and centuries and centuries. It's something that's really only been around since about the 18th century. From having pine trees in our living rooms, that was actually brought in by Queen Victoria's husband. He brought that tradition over from Germany. Having beliefs in St. Nicholas and Santa Claus came around the 18th century. The idea of having anything to do with Christmas. So the story of the Christmas Carol, as you probably have heard, probably even seen many different versions of it, many different adaptations of it over the years. When Christmas Carol came out, it came out at a very fortunate time. Not very fortunate for Dickens at the time, so he wrote that story within the space of 6 weeks, and he wanted it to be a Christmas story, and he was hoping to get a fair bit of money for it because he had a big family with another one on the way as well, and he was in a lot of debt, so he was hoping with this story that he would get a fair bit of money to help him out of his situation. Although it was somewhat popular, people were buying it, especially at the timing of when he brought it out. It was very Christmas orientated. People wanted Christmas stories, they wanted Christmas songs, they wanted things to symbolise Christmas, but only a select number of people bought it in the end, so hence it didn't actually sell that much, so Dickens himself didn't actually get that much for the book itself. But even to this day, people still celebrate and watch and read A Christmas Carol, and it is still seen as this iconic Christmas story that just basically came out at the right time, but also kind of the wrong time because it was so new, people weren't buying it, but also it kind of jumped on the new bandwagon of Christmas being a thing. Now, our ideas of Christmas now comes from the 18th century, 1800s, all the way down to the food we have. When you have mince pies today, they tend to be very fruity, but traditionally, when they were first originally made, they would actually have mincemeat in them, and it wasn't uncommon for even kings to be eating these mincemeat based pies. The pies themselves would have different symbolism on them, they might have stars on them, and if you were very good with pastry, you might even do a little baby Jesus on top as well. Then, like I said, by the 18th century, when you have Charles Dickens, Victorian era, when Christmas trees are coming in, Christmas stories are coming in, everything to do with Christmas is coming in, the mince pies changed to a more sweet dish rather than a savoury dish. So what does Christmas mean? Well, today it's a very commercialised thing. It's very much the buy the latest gadget, buy the latest thing, and a lot of the religious beliefs behind it is kind of simmered into the background. People still put an angel on their tree, some people still go to church, some people even hear the carols. For some, even people in my own family who are not overly religious, we like the idea that around Christmas time we want to go and listen to Mass in the church and just kind of get into that lovely overflowing Christmas spirit, and it's one of those wonderful things that as soon as the 1st of December rolls round, everybody's in that Christmas spirit. The Christmas spirit itself is not just the gadgets, the toys, everything like that. It's how people feel. At this time of the year, people tend to be more optimistic, tend to be more kind to one another, and it's the time when genuinely we eat, drink, and we are merry with one another. So what are your thoughts about Christmas? Do you think we are still stuck with the 18th century, 1800s based traditions, or have you got your own traditions? Me personally, I don't have any of my own traditions. The only tradition we really have in my family is we eat croquette potatoes on our Christmas dinner and we don't have Yorkshires. I know a lot of people, if you're from Yorkshire, you may have Yorkshires with your Christmas dinner. We don't tend to do that in my family. We tend to have Christmas dinner at lunchtime, and we have croquette potatoes, which is mashed potato rolled in breadcrumbs. That's literally my only family tradition that we actually have. That and obviously getting drunk, but I think everybody has that as a Christmas tradition. But I want to know from you, what are your Christmas traditions? Do you like this time of year? Some people don't even like this. Are you religious? Do you see it from the religious perspective? Or do you just somebody who likes the feel of it, the fact that everybody seems to be a lot happier and more cheerier around this time of year? Please let me know down in the comments below. I hope you've enjoyed this video, and I will see you again in another video tomorrow. Thank you for watching.